be some. Let me just give you for instance, domestic violence. When I started in 1985, the domestic violence, if I remember right, had not been fully developed. And a lot of officers believed, I think as a lot of people believe, that, hey, if a husband decides to hit his wife, that's their business. That happens in their home. And that's just the way it is. The police should get involved. Yeah, now you're all looking at me like, yeah, because we can't imagine that today. But think about it, late 80s, it was the same with DUI. If a guy went out and got drunk, think of Otis on Andy Griffith, it was fun. He went out and he drove drunk. That was fun. And a lot of times back then, and once again before my time, we just pick that person up and take them home until we found out that people who were DUI were killing people. So the legislature addressed it. Well, domestic violence. We figured out that not always husband on wife, male on female, but majority of the time. And we found out people were getting seriously hurt and even killed from this. So the legislature addressed this, and they gave law enforcement more authority to address that problem. And one of the things that this state did in the early 90s, 1990, 1991, they created provisions in the law for protective orders, which a victim could go get help from the court. The state created a stalking law. And we were only the second state in the nation to have that law, California being the first. When you think with all the celebrities, that's not unusual. So today, we spend a lot of time training police officers that, look, this is a very violent act. It's not something that needs to be kept in the house. This is something we need to address and try to put a stop to. But what I do want to talk about, there were three, in my opinion, three big events, or three big factors that really changed law enforcement in the time that I was involved. And all three of them have good points and bad points. One of them is drugs. If you think about it, many of us take drugs to help us, deal with an illness or deal with an injury. But in the mid-'80s when I started, if you think about it, there was marijuana use, and remember how, oh my gosh, marijuana. Well, now, people talk about legal, well, not talking about it, they have legalized it in a lot of places. We saw the beginnings of cocaine, saw some LSD, the old blotter acid as they call it. And now when you start looking at the drugs that the officers are seeing today, you're seeing marijuana still, but most people look at that, like the state deregulated that a couple years ago, where we don't arrest for possession of marijuana. We have to give them a ticket. We can't arrest them. But you're seeing synthetic drugs, and that's the bath salts that have been a hot topic. Now the state has outlawed those, but some states still have them, or they would take, you and I talked about, what was that, salvia? Oh, yeah. And they would put chemicals on that, and they'll label that as not for human consumption. But that's exactly what it is. And that's sold in gas stations and places around here all the time. Crack. Remember how in the early 90s, late 90s, crack was such a bad epidemic? That's taking cocaine and making it in a rock form where they can just smoke that whole rock instead of having to shoot up or snort that cocaine. It got so bad that the federal government even created stricter penalties for crack versus cocaine. Meth, we've all heard of meth, the methamphetamines. That's the ones that are cooking, they take chemicals and actually cook this drug. And we've had these, last year in Florence, we found 11 meth labs in the city of Florence. It went from where it used to be in a bathtub. They would rent a hotel and they would cook this in a bathtub. That's how much room they needed. Now they can take a 24-ounce Pepsi or Diet Mountain Dew bottle and cook it in the bottle, shake it up. And what we're seeing is people coming into the hospital and they'll have burns on the insides of their legs because they'll take that bottle and they'll shake it up and then they put it between their legs to hold it to try to add chemicals to it, and it spills on them or burns them. Or you'll see burns on the side because they'll keep it in their pockets. Meth is still, in our area, it's not as bad, but you go one county south in Gallatin County, and the sheriff there's a very good friend, he'll tell you meth is eating them alive. Absolutely eating them alive. But even for us, what in this area right now has become one of the worst drug issues is heroin. And we're still seeing it. There was an article today I saw on one of the news things about how, and I'm not blaming this on Cincinnati, not at all, but a lot of the heroin's coming out of Cincinnati. So you're seeing people drive across the bridges, they go into over the Rhine, that area, they buy their heroin, and it used to be they would come back across the river and they would stop on Kyle's Lane, down there by the Newport Pavilion on that side. Sometimes they'd make it up to Buttermilk Pike, they'd stop and they'd shoot up with heroin. And sometimes they would shoot up and they'd overdose and die because it's different amounts and nobody knows exactly how much is there. Well, now they're not even waiting to come back across the bridges, they're shooting up as they're driving back across. And it's really creating a lot of issues, a lot of dangerous drivers out there. So the heroin issue is real, it's very bad, I call it a scourge, it by all means is. There's a whole movement now by law enforcement and the medical field and the community to say, how do we address this? Because if you think the heroin's only an inner city problem, it's not. Folks, it's right here in Florence, Boone County, Ellesmere, Erlanger, Covington, it's there. And it's been about 2 years ago now in September about 2 years ago, we had 5 heroin overdose deaths in 1 week in Florence, in the city of Florence alone. It must have been just a bad batch of heroin. What a lot of the users are doing now is they'll go to their car, and when they go to shoot up, they'll park about 10 feet away from a telephone pole, and they put the car in drive, and they put their foot on the brake. And when they shoot up, if it causes them to pass out, if it's too strong of a dose, they pass out, they take their foot off the brake, and they go and they crash into the pole, and then police and fire come and rescue them. So that's how they realize they have a problem. Don't get me wrong, we not everybody that's addicted to heroin is a bad person. Some people just, we hear a lot that it was either an injury, a surgery, a car crash, where they took pills for pain, and then the doctor tried to get them off of the pills, and they couldn't get off the pills, so they turned to heroin. Pills are still a problem for us, not as bad. What's interesting is as you go around the state, the heroin problem seems to be worse here in northern Kentucky, but the Louisville chief told me a couple months ago that they're having all kinds of problems with it. Western Kentucky you still see a lot of meth. Eastern Kentucky you see a lot of pills. So, the state's like, oh man, we got a lot of different problems. But it's just something that you need to be aware of. And there are people from age 15 up to 75 that are using heroin, and it really is, it's that bad of a problem. Second one, technology. And once again, good and bad. When I started in Florence, there was an officer who I worked with very closely, Betsy, I remember, Damian Stanton. You may remember Damian. Wonderful guy. We would go to the rest area, and we would write down every license plate of every car in the rest area, and then come back up the interstate to dispatch, give them that list. They would run the license plates, because they were the only ones that could run them, and we'd run back to the rest area, hoping that if there was a stolen car in the rest area, they would still be there by the time we got back. And we thought we were getting technologically advanced when we figured out, hey, instead of writing them all down, we can just take a tape recorder, drive film ABC 1, 2, 3, that type of stuff. Well, now, when you look at that technology, everybody's got a smartphone. On that smartphone's a camera, is a recorder. I mean, look how much comes about from that. I rarely was on a crash, like especially on the interstate, but even on the surface roads, where you wouldn't see people drive by taking pictures as police and fire are doing their thing at the crash. The technology with cell phones. On the interstate, it's not unusual for dispatch to have 30 to 35 calls about a single car crash. And there were people that would call 911 even after police and fire were there, because they said that's what we were told to do. But the technology where it's even on the good side, which is, you know, right now, all the police cars in Boone County now have computers in them. They are able to do searches on the internet, to run their own license plates. You know, they can do all this now in the cruisers, where we used to have to call dispatch, and there was one terminal for everybody to run. The officers have what they call e-citations, e-traffic reports, all that type of stuff. Now, instead of filling out that handwritten citation with 5 copies, and the judge would always complain, I remember Judge Bamberger raising heck with us all the time because he got the last copy, and it wasn't dark enough for him to read all the time, which I understand. But now, they take that driver's license, scan it like you do at Kroger's, and it populates the field, and they can do citations in a minute, and then it prints it out right there, all in the cars. One of the recent things that have been coming up, if you are a news junkie like I am, is what they call license plate readers, if you're familiar with those. We have a couple of those in Florence. When we bought the one, it was $20,000, and then we picked up one off of a grant. Boone County picked one up off the same grant, the airport picked one up off the same grant. What that looks like is just 2 little cameras mounted on the light bar of the car. And as that cruiser drives down the street, it reads every license plate that it passes and takes a picture. If that license plate comes back, what we call a hit, stolen, wanted, maybe an amber alert for missing child or a golden alert for a missing adult, it would beep on that computer to tell that officer, hey, and then it would pull up that picture and say, here it is. And for law enforcement, it's been a fantastic tool. But what we also found out was that we were able to solve, not a lot yet, but some crime, because if Betsy told us, no, I haven't been on Mall Road in 2 years, we take her license plate and run it through the database, and it says, no, because here, on this date and this time, she was here. Guess what? And that's what a lot of agencies are doing. And I understand concerns about privacy. And those are things that I think the courts will wind up addressing in the coming years. But the technology is still wonderful. Now, okay, let's go to the other side. Where has it been bad? Especially with the internet, with computers, you've got ID theft, identity theft, which is still a huge problem. Internet scams, you know, where people still, you know, they make an email from the IRS. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you the IRS is never going to email you. They like sending their people out or mailing it to you. The FBI is good for that. They'll get people who say, hey, I'm from the FBI, email them, you need to send me this information. The FBI is never going to do that. So that still happens. Along with those computer crimes, theft, embezzlement, you know, how better to get into somebody's account than to do how many online bank, you know, and you know, it opens up some possibilities for thefts. You hear it every day. Sexting, you know, and now it's getting prevalent again, where young folks will take, because you know, this little cell phone has more computer power, RAM and memory and all that, than the first computer that launched the first spaceship into outer space, the first Apollo spaceship. So, and I mean, my daughter, as Betsy calls her, my little daughter, she's now going to be 22. But you know, the stuff that they can do on these computers and these smartphones is unbelievable. Well, one of them is they'll take pictures, especially young kids, take pictures of themselves and send it to friends. Okay, that's bad enough, but now we have people who are getting these kids to do this, and then when